You probably clicked this because you thought it was going to be about being kind, or being selfless, or maybe just being a decent person. Or maybe you're already wondering whether wanting people to like you counts as a problem at all. And now you're checking yourself for checking yourself, which is usually how this goes. Yeah. Hi, this one's for you. Most people assume people pleasers are just nice, maybe a little too accommodating, maybe just the type who hate conflict and need to grow a backbone. But that explanation barely touches what's actually happening under the surface. Because when you understand the mechanism behind why some people keep saying yes when they mean no, you'll realize this was never about being weak, it was about staying safe. So let's actually start there. Your nervous system is always making predictions about what leads to connection and what leads to rupture. Tone of voice, facial shifts, pauses in conversation, whether someone's energy changed by 2% and you somehow still noticed it. In people who chronically please others, that system becomes absurdly sensitive. Not broken, sensitive, trained. That's the short version. But the more interesting question isn't whether people-pleasing is unhealthy. It's why it feels so hard to stop even when you know it's costing you. Because there is a huge difference between kindness, where you're choosing to care, and fawning, where you're managing another person's emotional state so nothing turns against you. You're not being generous at that point. You're negotiating for emotional safety in real time. And the exhausting part is how invisible that can look from the outside. Somebody asks for a favor. You say yes immediately. They think, great, that was easy. What they don't see is the full chain reaction that happened in under 3 seconds. The calculation, the scan, the fear of disappointing them, the imagined awkwardness if you say no, the possibility that your refusal might change how they see you. The answer leaves your mouth before you've even checked whether you had one to give. A lot of people who do this grew up in environments where keeping other people comfortable was not optional. No melodrama necessary. Sometimes it just meant you had to notice moods early. You had to soften yourself quickly. You had to become easy to be around, low maintenance, convenient, emotionally non-disruptive. Your brain learned that being liked was useful, but being difficult was risky. So it adapted, and honestly, it adapted well. The problem is that the adaptation doesn't retire when the environment changes. It follows you into adulthood and starts showing up in places it was never meant to run the whole show. In work meetings where you volunteer before thinking. In relationships where you apologize just to get the tension to end. In text messages where someone sends, "Can we talk?" and your whole body acts like a siren just went off. The threat isn't always real anymore. But your body still responds like it is. Cortisol is cortisol. Your chest doesn't care whether the danger is physical, relational, or entirely anticipated. There's also a version of this that hides especially well because it gets praised. You're the reliable one, the thoughtful one, the one who remembers everyone's birthday, helps when nobody asks, says no worries when there are, in fact, many worries. And because the behavior is socially rewarded, you can go a very long time before realizing that what looks like generosity from the outside feels like quiet resentment on the inside. Think about the last time someone asked you for something you genuinely did not want to do. A normal person might say, "I can't this week, but maybe another time," hit send, and continue with their day. A people pleaser opens the message, stares at it, writes a version that sounds too blunt, softens it, worries the softer version sounds fake, adds 3 exclamation points, deletes 2, adds a smiley face, deletes the smiley face because now it feels unserious, explains too much, deletes the explanation because now it sounds defensive, brings the explanation back because otherwise it sounds cold, reads the whole thing like they're the other person, imagines them reading it in a disappointed tone, almost agrees to the thing just to make the discomfort stop, and then after all of that, sends a response that still somehow feels rude. And then comes the best part, obviously. They put the phone down and immediately feel guilty for having a boundary at all. The cruelest part of people-pleasing is that it often makes you deeply compassionate toward everyone except yourself. You will bend over backward to make sure nobody feels rejected, unheard, inconvenienced, or like too much. And then you will call yourself selfish for needing one afternoon alone. You'll reassure your friend that healthy relationships can survive honesty, and then panic that one honest sentence from you will ruin yours. Same heart. Different rules? Psychologists sometimes talk about this in terms of fawn responses, one of the lesser discussed survival patterns alongside fight, flight, or freeze. And once you see it, you can't really unsee it. Some people get louder under stress. Some people shut down. Some people become exceptionally agreeable. Not because they have no needs, but because their system decided long ago that having visible needs came with a cost. Something else worth noticing, people pleasers are not equally accommodating about everything. They can make fast decisions when there is no emotional risk attached. What do you want for dinner? Fine. Which shirt should I buy? Doesn't matter. But the moment a decision contains even a small chance of disappointing someone, everything slows down, which tells you something important. The behavior isn't random. It maps directly onto attachment, belonging, approval, and the fear of relational loss. Your guilt knows exactly what you care about. It's just using that knowledge against you. And because this whole pattern is so relational, rest can feel strangely uncomfortable here too. Not physical rest, necessarily. Relational rest. The kind where you stop monitoring, stop anticipating, stop adjusting your tone, stop checking whether everyone is okay with you. For a lot of people, that kind of rest feels less like peace and more like exposure. Because if you're not managing the emotional weather in the room, then who is? So even when nothing is wrong, you stay slightly braced, slightly available, slightly on call. Understanding this won't turn you into someone who suddenly loves confrontation. That's not the point. Awareness doesn't erase conditioning on command. It just gives you a better question to ask in the moment. Not how do I make sure they're never upset with me, but what am I predicting will happen if I disappoint them, and is that prediction actually true here? Because most of the time, the catastrophe your body is preparing for is older than the moment you're standing in. The fear feels current. The pattern usually isn't. What's happening now may just be a well-practiced attempt to prevent an outcome that no longer has your name on it. And no, the goal is probably not to become the kind of person who says exactly what they think with zero hesitation and sleeps like a baby afterward. That's a fantasy people love online. The real goal is smaller and more honest than that. To notice the reflex before it fully takes over. To pause long enough to check whether your yes belongs to you. To hear the urge to smooth everything over and say, I know what you're trying to do. I know you think this keeps us safe, but you don't get to volunteer my whole evening again. That is not selfish. That's recovery, or at least the beginning of it. One last thing. And I only mention resources I'd personally find useful. There's a link in the description to a set of practical guides built for people trying to get out of patterns like this without turning the whole process into another thing to perform perfectly. Boundaries, nervous system regulation, sleep, mental reset, focus, the boring but life-changing stuff. Each one is built around daily actions, not just insight. Because insight is great, but it doesn't help much at 11:40 p.m. when you're agreeing to something you already resent. It's in the pinned comment too if you want to look at it, and subscribe if you want more videos like this.